Okay. I think it's time for another drinking drama. A quickie. Let's see if this is actually going to work, though. Is my YouTube stream going to function? Yeah, it is. Fantastic. Theoretically, anyway. All right. Hey, Jeremiah. Hey, Thomas. How you doing? Is today Tuesday? It is Tuesday, right? It's a little early in the week. But I had a successful day. I got my hours in, and I thought I would do a really quickie drink and read. Because I was drinking, but I wasn't reading, and that just seemed sad because I was eating Doritos. And this is infinitely better. What I think I'm going to do is a Neil Gaiman short story. Because Neil Gaiman was on Twitter like last week, was saying that if you wanted to read some of his stuff online for friends, as long as you're not making money off of it, feel free. So I thought, why not? So I thought I would do a short. I thought I would do Click-clack the rattle bag, because it's kind of creepy. Not too long. And I dig it. And it's freely available online anyway. And if at some point they rescind the open invitation to be able to do this, it's easy to take down. So, might as well do it. But there's also this other Neil Gaiman story. If that one goes too quick, the one that's almost kind of like it's like a fairy tale mystery, I think. Hey, yeah, Thomas, definitely be drinking with me. Let me see, what was that other short story? I'm going to look it up real quick. Well, I'm getting ready to go here. It was called... Oh, yeah, come on. Is it The Case of the 4 and 20 Blackbirds? That's the one. Where it's got kind of like a noir Sam Spade kind of vibe to it, but it's like the Queen of Hearts, and yeah, I might have to do that one too. Let's see here. Where did my stuff go? Click-clack the rattle bag, though. That one's probably a good one to start with. Why don't we do that? All right, here we go. But I'm going to take a one drink for fortification. What do you mean Jeff is still freaking you out? Jeremiah, which Jeff? I don't know who's in here anyway. All right. Here we roll. Click-clack the Rattle Bag by Neil Gaiman. Before you take me up to bed, will you tell me a story? Do you actually need me to take you up to bed? I asked the boy. He thought for a moment. Then, with intense seriousness, Yes, actually, I think you do. It's because I've finished my homework, and so it's my bedtime, and I am a bit scared. Not very scared, just a bit. But it is a very big house, and lots of times the lights don't work, and it's sort of dark. I reached over and tousled his hair. I can understand that, I said. It is a very big old house. He nodded. We were in the kitchen, where it was light and warm. I put down my magazine on the kitchen table. What kind of story would you like me to tell you? Well, he said thoughtfully, I don't think it should be too scary, because then when I go up to my bed, oops, I said that wrong. It's go up to bed. Jeff Goldblum, you love Jeff Goldblum. He's perfect. I don't think it should be too scary, because then when I go up to bed, I will just be thinking about monsters the whole time. But if it isn't just a little bit scary, then I won't be interested. And you make up scary stories, don't you? I know she says that's what you do. She exaggerates. I write stories, yes. Nothing that's been published yet, though, and I write lots of different kinds of stories. But you do write scary stories? Yes. The boy looked up at me from the shadows by the door where he was waiting. Do you know any stories about Click-clack the rattle bag? I don't think so. Those are the best sorts of stories. Do they tell them at your school? He shrugged. Sometimes. What's a Click-clack the rattle bag story? He was a precocious child and was unimpressed by his sister's boyfriend's ignorance. He could see it on his face. Everybody knows them. I don't, I said, trying not to smile. He looked up at me as if he was trying to decide whether or not I was pulling his leg. He said, I think maybe you should take me up to my bedroom, and then you can tell me a story before I go to sleep, but a very not scary story because I'll be up in my bedroom then, and it's actually a bit dark up there too. I said, shall I leave a note for your sister telling her where we are? You can, but you'll hear when they get back. The front door is very slammy. We walked out of the warm and cozy kitchen into the hallway of the big house, where it was chilly and drafty and dark. I flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. The bulb's gone, the boy said. That always happens. Our eyes adjusted to the shadows. The moon was almost full, and blue-white moonlight shone in through the high windows on the staircase down into the hall. We'll be all right, I said. Yes, said the boy, soberly. I am very glad you're here. He seemed less precocious now. His hand found mine, and he held onto my fingers comfortably, trustingly, as if he'd known me all his life. I felt responsible and adult. I did not know if the feeling I had for his sister, who was my girlfriend, was love, not yet, but I liked that the child treated me as one of the family. I felt like his big brother, and I stood taller, and if there was something unsettling about the empty house, I would not have admitted it for worlds. The stairs creaked beneath the threadbare stair carpet. Click-clacks, said the boy, are the best monsters ever. Are they from television? I don't think so. I don't think any people know where they come from. Mostly, they come from the dark. Good place for a monster to come. Yes. We walked along the upper corridor in the shadows, walking from patch of moonlight to patch of moonlight. It really was a big house. I wished I had a flashlight. They come from the dark, said the boy, holding onto my hand. I think probably they're made of dark, and they come in when you don't pay attention. That's when they come in. And then they take you back to their, not nests. What's a word that's like nests but not? House? No, it's not a house. Lair? He was silent. Then, I think that's the word, yes. Lair. He squeezed my hand. He stopped talking. Right. So they take the people who don't pay attention back to their lair. No, wait, no, that's him. See, I messed up. Wrong guy. Yes, more recording. Right, so they take the people who don't pay attention back to their lair, and what do they do then, your monsters? Do they suck all the blood out of you like vampires? He snorted. Vampires don't suck all the blood out of you. They only drink a little bit, just to keep them going and, flying around. Click-clacks are much scarier than vampires. I'm not scared of vampires, I told him. Me neither. I'm not scared of vampires either. Do you want to know what click-clacks do? They drink you, said the boy. Like a Coke? Coke is very bad for you, said the boy. If you put a tooth in Coke in the morning, it will be dissolved into nothing. That's how bad Coke is for you, and why you must always clean your teeth every night. I'd heard the Coke story as a boy and had been told as an adult that it wasn't true, but was certain that a lie which promoted dental hygiene was a good lie, and I let it pass. "Click-clacks drink you," said the boy. "First they bite you, and then you go all ishy inside, and all your meat and all your brains and everything except your bones and your skin turns into a wet, milkshakey stuff, and then the click-clack sucks it out through the holes where your eyes used to be." "That's disgusting," I told him. "Did you make it up?" We'd reached the last flight of stairs, all the way into the big house. "No. I can't believe you kids make up stuff like that." "You didn't ask me about the rattle bag," he said. "Right. What's the rattle bag?" "Well," he said, sagely, soberly, a small voice from the darkness beside me. "Once you're just bones and skin, they hang you up on a hook, and you rattle in the wind." "So what do these click-clacks look like?" Even as I asked him, I wished I could take the question back and leave it unasked. I thought, huge spidery creatures, like the one in the shower that morning. I'm afraid of spiders. I was relieved when the boy said, "They look like what you aren't expecting, what you aren't paying attention to." We were climbing wooden steps now. I held on to the railing on my left, held his hand with my right as he walked beside me. It smelled like dust and old wood that high in the house. The boy's tread was certain, though, even though the moonlight was scarce. "Do you know what story you're going to tell me to put me to bed?" he asked. "It doesn't actually have to be scary." "Not really." "Maybe you could tell me about this evening. Tell me what you did." "That won't make much of a story for you. My girlfriend just moved into a new place on the edge of town. She inherited Dang, there it went. I was doing so well. She inherited it from an aunt or someone. It's very big and very old. I'm going to spend my first night with her tonight, so I've been waiting for an hour or so for her and her housemates to come back with the wine and an Indian takeaway." "See?" said the boy. There was that precocious amusement again. But all kids can be insufferable sometimes when they think they know something you don't. It's probably good for them. "You know all that, but you don't think. You just let your brain fill in the gaps." He pushed open the door to the attic room. It was perfectly dark now, but the opening door disturbed the air, and I heard things rattle gently, like dry bones in thin bags in the slight wind. Click, clack, click, clack, like that. I would have pulled away then, if I could, but small, firm fingers pulled me forward, unrelentingly, into the dark. So scary. Thank you. Cheers. Oh my goodness. Maybe it's time to do another one. My glass is still full. And that one was so short. So maybe the case of the 4 and 20 blackbirds. That might be a fun one to do. After a drink. Fabulous. The case of the 4 and 20 blackbirds. I sat in my office, nursing a glass. I see I already messed up. The Case of the 4 and 20 Blackbirds by Neil Gaiman. We'll drink and start over. Here we go. Last story, if you came in halfway, was Click-clack the Rattle Bag, both by Neil Gaiman. The Case of the 4 and 20 Blackbirds by Neil Gaiman. I sat in my office, nursing a glass of hooch and idly cleaning my automatic. Outside, the rain fell steadily, like it seems to do most of the time in our fair city, whatever the tourist board says. Hell, I didn't care. I'm not on the tourist board. I'm a private dick, and one of the best, although you wouldn't have known it. The office was crumbling, the rent was unpaid, and the hooch was my last. Things are tough all over. To cap it all, the only client I'd had all week never showed up on the street corner where I'd waited for him. He said it was going to be a big job, but now I'd never know. He kept a prior appointment in the morgue. So when the dame walked into my office, I was sure my luck had changed for the better. "What are you selling, lady?" She gave me a look that would have induced heavy breathing and a pumpkin, and which shot my heartbeat up to 3 figures. She had long, blonde hair and a figure that would have made Thomas Aquinas forget his vows. I forgot all mine about never taking cases from dames. "What would you say to some of the green stuff?" she asked, in a husky voice, getting straight to the point. "Continue, sister." I didn't want her to know how bad I needed the dough, so I held my hand in front of my mouth. It doesn't help if a client sees you salivate. She opened her purse and flipped out a photograph, glossy 8 by 10. "Do you recognize that man?" "In my business, you know who people are." "Yeah." "He's dead." "I know that too, sweetheart. It's old news. It was an accident." Her gaze went so icy you could have chipped it into cubes and cooled a cocktail with it. "My brother's death was no accident." I raised an eyebrow. You need a lot of arcane skills in my business, and said, "Your brother, eh? Funny. She hadn't struck me as the type that had brothers." "I'm Jill Dumpty." "So, your brother was Humpty Dumpty." "And he didn't fall off that wall, Mr. Horner. He was pushed." "Interesting, if true. Dumpty had his finger in most of the crooked pies in town. I could think of 5 guys who would have preferred to see him dead than alive without trying. Without trying too hard, anyway." "You seen the cops about this?" "Nah, the king's men aren't interested in anything to do. Let's try that again. Nah, the king's men aren't interested in anything to do with his death. They say they did all they could in trying to put him together again after the fall." I leaned back in my chair. "So, what's it to you? Why do you need me?" "I want you to find the killer, Mr. Horner. I want him brought to justice. I want him to fry like an egg. Oh, and one other little thing," she added, lightly. "Before he died, Humpty had a small manila envelope full of photographs he was meant to be sending me. Medical photos. I'm a trainee nurse, and I need them to pass my finals." I inspected my nails, then looked up at her face, taking in a handful of waste and Easter egg bazonkas on the way up. She was a looker, although her cute nose was a little on the shiny side. "I'll take the case. 75 a day and 200 bones for results." She smiled. My stomach twisted around once and went into orbit. "You get another 200 if you get me those photographs. I want to be a nurse, real bad." Then she dropped 350s on my desktop. I let a devil-may-care grin play across my rugged face. "Say, sister, how about letting me take you out to dinner? I just came into some money." She gave an involuntary shiver of anticipation and muttered something about having a thing about midgets, so I knew I was onto a good thing. Then she gave me a lopsided smile that would have made Albert Einstein drop a decimal point. "First, find my brother's killer, Mr. Horner, and my photographs. Then we can play." She closed the door behind her. Maybe it was still raining, but I didn't notice. I didn't care. There are parts of town the tourist board don't mention, parts of town where the police travel in 3s, if they travel at all. In my line of work, you get to visit them more than is healthy. Healthy is never. He was waiting for me outside Luigi's. I slid up behind him, my rubber-soled shoes soundless on the shiny, wet sidewalk. "Hi, you cock!" He's jumped and, well, where'd he go? I said the wrong voice. Dang it. Dang it. "Hi, you cock." He jumped and spun around. I found myself gazing up into the muzzle of a .45. "Ow, Horner." He put the gun away. "Don't call me cock. I'm Bernie Robin to you, short stuff, and don't you forget it." Cock Robin is good enough for me, Cock. Who killed Humpty Dumpty? He was a strange-looking bird, but you can't be choosy in my profession. He was the best underworld lead I had. Let's see the color of your money. I showed him a 50. Hell, he muttered. It's green. Why can't they make puce or mauve money for a change? He took it, though. All I know is that the fat man had his finger in a lot of pies. So? One of those pies had 4 and 20 blackbirds in it. Huh? Do I have to spell it out for you? Ugh! He crumpled to the sidewalk, an arrow protruding from his back. Cock Robin wasn't going to be doing any more chirping. Sergeant O'Grady looked down at the body, then he looked down at me. Faith and begorra, to be sure, he said, if it isn't little Jack Horner himself. I didn't kill Cock Robin, Sarge. And I suppose the call that we got down at the station telling us we were going to be rubbing the late Mr. Robin out. That's a weird sentence. I gotta do it again, because I totally messed it up. Let's try it again. Hey, Frugal Sim. Oh. And I suppose that the call we got down at the station telling us we were going to be rubbing the late Mr. Robin out here, tonight, was just a hoax. If I'm the killer, where are my arrows? I thumbed open a pack of gum and started to chew. It's a frame. He puffed on his meerschaum and then put it away and idly played a couple of phrases of the William Tell overture on his oboe. Maybe, maybe not, but you're still a suspect. Don't leave town. And Horner? Yeah? Dumpty's death was an accident. That's what the coroner said. That's what I say. Drop the case. I thought about it. Then I thought of the money and the girl. No dice, Sarge. He shrugged. It's your funeral. He said it like it probably would be. I had a funny feeling like he could be right. You're out of your depth, Horner. You're playing with the big boys, and it ain't healthy. From what I could remember of my school days, he was correct. Whenever I played with the big boys, I always wound up having the stuffing beaten out of me. But how could O'Grady have known that? Then I remembered something else. O'Grady was the one that used to beat me up the most. It was time for what we in the profession call legwork. I made a few discreet inquiries. Dang it. Enquiries? Come on, Travis. Hey, that's last time I drink, so I really gotta go now and never mess up again. I made a few discreet inquiries around town, but found out nothing about Dumpty that I didn't know already. Humpty Dumpty was a bad egg. I remembered him when he was new in town, a smart young animal trainer with a nice line in training mice to run up clocks. He went to the bad pretty fast, though. Gambling, drink, women, it's the same story all over. A bright young kid thinks that the streets of Nurseryland are paved with gold. Nurseryland? Dang it. Well, I'm just going to pretend drink, because I am out. The larder is getting bare here during quarantine. A bright young kid thinks that the streets of Nurseryland? I still can't say Nurseryland. A bright young kid thinks that the streets of Nurseryland? Can you really say Nurseryland as a human being? Does that function? Is that a word even? I don't even think it's a word. A bright young kid thinks that the streets of Nurseryland are paved with gold, and by the time he finds out otherwise, it's much too late. Dumpty started off with extortions and robbery on a small scale. He trained up a team of spiders to scare little girls away from their curds and whey, which he'd pick up and sell on the black market. Then he moved on to blackmail, the nastiest game. We crossed paths once when I was hired by this young society kid, let's call him Georgie Porgy, to recover some compromising snaps of him kissing the girls and making them cry. I got the snaps, but I learned it wasn't healthy to mess with a fat man. And I don't make the same mistakes twice. Hell, in my line of work, I can't afford to make the same mistakes once. It's a tough world out there. I remember when Little Bo Peep first came to town, but you don't want to hear my troubles. If you're not dead yet, you've got troubles of your own. I checked out the newspaper files on Dumpty's death. One minute he was sitting on a wall, the next he was in pieces at the bottom. All the king's horses and all the king's men were on the scene in minutes, but he needed more than first aid. A medic named Foster was called, a friend of Dumpty's from his Gloucester days, although I don't know of anything a doc can do when you're dead. Hang on a second. Dr. Foster. I got that old feeling you get in my line of work. 2 little brain cells rubbed together the right way, and in seconds you've got a 24-karat cerebral fire on your hands. You remember the client who didn't show, the one I'd waited for all day on the street corner? An accidental death. I hadn't bothered to check it out. I couldn't afford to waste time on clients who aren't going to pay for it. 3 deaths, it seemed, not 1. I reached for the telephone and rang the police station. "This is Horner," I told the desk man. "Let me speak to Sergeant O'Grady." There was a crackling, and he came on the line. "O'Grady speaking." "It's Horner." "Hi, little Jack." That was just like O'Grady. He'd been kidding me about my size since we were kids together. "You finally figured out that Dumpty's death was accidental?" "Nope. I'm now investigating 3 deaths. The Fat Man's, Bernie Robbins, and Dr. Foster's." "Foster, the plastic surgeon. His death was an accident." "Sure, and your mother was married to your father." There was a pause. "Horner, if you phoned me up just to talk dirty, I'm not amused." "Okay, wise guy, if Humpty Dumpty's death was an accident and so was Dr. Foster's, tell me just one thing. Who killed Cock Robin?" I don't ever get accused of having too much imagination, but there's one thing I'd swear to. I could hear him grinning over the phone as he said, "You did, Horner, and I'm staking my badge on it." The line went dead. Boom. My office was cold and lonely, so I wandered down to Joe's bar for some companionship and a drink or 3. 24 blackbirds, a dead doctor, the Fat Man, Cock Robin. Heck, this case had more holes in it than a Swiss cheese and more loose ends than a torn string vest. And where did the juicy Miss Dumpty come into it? Jack and Jill, we'd make a great team. When this was all over, perhaps we could go off together to Louie's little place on the hill where no one's interested in whether you got a marriage license or not. The Pail of Water, that was the name of the joint. I called over the bartender. "Hey, Joe." "Yeah, Mr. Horner?" He was polishing a glass with a rag that had seen better days as a shirt. "Did you ever meet the Fat Man's sister?" He scratched at his cheek. "Can't say as I did. His sister, huh? The Fat Man didn't have a sister." "You sure of that?" "Sure, I'm sure. It was the day my sister had her first kid. I told the Fat Man I was an uncle. He gave me this look and says, 'Ain't no way I'll ever be an uncle, Joe. Got no sisters or brothers, nor no other kinfolk neither.'" If the mysterious Miss Dumpty wasn't his sister, who was she? "Tell me, Joe, did you ever see him in here with a dame, about so high, shaped like this?" My hands described a couple of parabolas. "Looks like a blonde love goddess." He shook his head. "Never saw him with any dames. Recently he was hanging around with some medical guy, but the only thing he ever cared about was those crazy birds and animals of his." I took a swig of my drink. It nearly took the roof of my mouth off. Animals? I thought he'd given all that up. "No, a couple weeks back he was in here with a whole bunch of blackbirds he was training to sing. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before Yeah, I got no idea who." I put my drink down. A little of it spilt on the counter, and why I watched it strip the paint. "Thanks, Joe. You've been a big help." I handed him a $10 bill. "For information received," I said, adding, "Don't spend it all at once." In my profession, it's making little jokes like that keeps you sane. I had one contact left, Ma Hubbard. I found a payphone and called her number.
"Old Mother Hubbard's cupboard, cake shop and licensed soup kitchen."
"It's Horner, Ma."
"Jack, it ain't safe for me to talk to you."
"For old time's sake, sweetheart, you owe me a favor." Some 2-bit crooks had once knocked off the cupboard, leaving it bare. I tracked them down and returned the cakes and soup.
"Okay, but I don't like it."
"You know everything that goes on around here on the food front, Ma. What's the significance of a pie with 24 trained blackbirds in it?" She whistled, long and slow.
"You really don't know?"
"I wouldn't be asking you if I did."
"You should read the court pages of the papers next time, sugar. Geez, you are out of your depth."
"Come on, Ma, spill it."
It so happens that that particular dish was set before the king a few weeks back. Jack, are you still there?"
"I'm still here, ma'am," I said quietly. All of a sudden, a lot of things are starting to make sense. I put down the phone. It was beginning to look like little Jack Horner had pulled out a plum from this pie. It was raining, steady and cold. I phoned a cab. Quarter of an hour later, one lurched out of the darkness. "You're late, so complain to the tourist board." I climbed in the back, wound down the window, and lit a cigarette. And I went to see the Queen. The bottle isn't even in the room, unfortunately. Here we go. I think this is the last bit. The door to the private part of the palace was locked. It's the part that the public don't get to see. But I've never been public, and the little lock hardly slowed me up. The door to the private apartments was the big head rope. I just have to do a dance now because I don't have any more liquor left. The door to the private apartments with a big red heart on it was unlocked, so I knocked and walked straight in. The Queen of Hearts was alone, standing in front of the mirror, holding a plate of jam tarts with one hand, powdering her nose with the other. She turned, saw me, and gasped, dropping the tarts. "Hey, Queenie," I said. "Or would you feel more comfortable if I called you Jill?" She was still a good-looking slice of dame, even without the blonde wig.
"Get out of here,"
she hissed. "I don't think so, Toots." I sat down on the bed. "Let me spell a few things out for you."
"Go ahead."
She reached behind her for a concealed alarm button. I let her press it. I'd cut the wires on my way in. In my profession, there's no such thing as being too careful. "Let me spell a few things out for you."
"You just said that."
"I'll tell this my way, lady." I lit a cigarette, and a thin plume of blue smoke drifted heavenwards, which was where I was going if my hunch was wrong. Still, I've learned to trust hunches. "Try this on for size. Dumpty, the fat man, wasn't your brother. He wasn't even your friend. In fact, he was blackmailing you. He knew about your nose." She turned whiter than a number of corpses I've met in my time in the business. Her hand reached up and cradled her freshly powdered nose. "You see, I've known the fat man for many years, and many years ago he had a lucrative concern in training animals and birds to do certain unsavory things, and that got me to thinking. I had a client recently who didn't show due to his having been stiffed first. Dr. Foster of Gloucester, the plastic surgeon. The official version of his death was that he just sat too close to a fire and melted. But just suppose he was killed to stop him telling something that he knew. I put two and two together and hit the jackpot. Let me reconstruct the scene for you. You were out in the garden, probably hanging out some clothes, when along came one of Dumpty's trained pie blackbirds and pecked off your nose. So there you were, standing in the garden, your hand in front of your face, when along comes the fat man with an offer you couldn't refuse. He could introduce you to a plastic surgeon who could fix you up with a nose as good as new, for a price, and no one need ever know. Am I right so far?" She nodded dumbly, then finding her voice muttered,
"Pretty much. But I ran back into the parlor after the attack to eat some bread and honey. That was where he found me."
"Fair enough." The color was starting to come back into her cheeks now. "So, you had the operation from Foster, and no one was going to be any the wiser, until Dumpty told you that he had photos of the op. You had to get rid of him. A couple of days later, you were out walking in the palace grounds. There was Dumpty, sitting on a wall, his back to you, gazing out into the distance. In a fit of madness, you pushed, and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. By now you were in big trouble. Nobody suspected you of his murder, but where were the photographs? Foster didn't have them, although he smelled a rat and had to be disposed of, before he could see me. But you didn't know how much he told me, and you still didn't have the snapshots, so you took me on to find out. And that was your mistake, sister." Her lower lip trembled, and my heart quivered.
"You won't turn me in, will you?"
"Sister, you tried to frame me this afternoon. I don't take kindly to that." With a shaking hand, she started to unbutton her blouse.
"Perhaps we could come some to blah, 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 blah."
Damn it! Damn it!
"Perhaps we could come to some sort of arrangement."
I shook my head. Sorry, Your Majesty. Mrs. Horner's little boy Jack was always taught to keep his hands off royalty. It's a pity, but that's how it is. To be on the safe side, I looked away, which was a mistake. A cute little lady's pistol was in her hands and pointing at me before you could sing a song of sixpence. The shooter may have been small, but I knew it packed enough of a wallop to take me out of the game permanently. This dame was lethal.
Put that gun down, Your Majesty.
Sergeant O'Grady strolled through the bedroom door, his police special clutched in his ham-like fist.
I'm sorry I suspected you, Horner, he said dryly. You're lucky I did, though. Sure and begorra. I had you trailed here, and I overheard the whole thing.
Hi, Sarge. Thanks for stopping by. But I hadn't finished my explanation. If you'll take a seat, I'll wrap it up. He nodded brusquely and sat down near the door. His gun hardly moved. I got up from the bed and walked over to the Queen. You see, Toots, what I didn't tell you was who did have the snaps of your nose job. Humpty did, when you killed him. A charming frown crinkled her perfect brow.
I don't understand. I had the body searched.
Sure, afterwards. But the first people to get to the fat man were the king's men, the cops, and one of them pocketed the envelope. When any fuss had died down, the blackmail would have started again, only this time you wouldn't have known who to kill. And I owe you an apology. I bent down to tie my shoelaces.
Why?
I accused you of trying to frame me this afternoon. You didn't. That arrow was the property of a boy who was the best archer in my school. I should have recognized that distinctive fletching anywhere. Isn't that right? I said, turning back to the door. Sparrow O'Grady. Under the guise of tying up my shoelaces, I had already palmed a couple of the Queen's jam tarts, and flinging one of them upwards, I neatly smashed the room's only light bulb. It only delayed the shooting a few seconds, but a few seconds was all I needed, and as the Queen of Hearts and Sergeant Sparrow O'Grady cheerfully shot each other to bits, I split. In my business, you have to look after number one. Munching on a jam tart, I walked out of the palace grounds and into the street. I paused by a trash can to try to burn the manila envelope of photographs I had pulled from O'Grady's pocket as I walked past him, but it was raining so hard they wouldn't catch. When I got back to my office, I phoned the tourist board to complain. They said the rain was good for the farmers, and I told them what they could do with it. They said that things are tough all over, and I said, yeah. The end. Well, I emptied my glass anyway. Thanks, y'all. Happy Tuesday.